Alrighty, well, we'll go ahead and get started. I am so sorry, y'all. I still haven't done your essays. They will get done. Just this proposal for the master's program is eating up all my time. So, but that should be done next week, and I will be back on top of things. And next time you take a test, it'll be much better, I promise. So thank you so much for your patience with me. I very much appreciate it. Also, thanks in advance for your patience with me today, because I have a little cold. I tested yesterday. It is not COVID. I did not want to infect y'all. I am wearing a more powerful mask than usual, even. But my voice might go, so the captions may be even more important than usual. We'll see how it all goes. So for that being said, I will make sure we have the ones up that you can see while I'm on the slides without blocking the slides. Alrighty, so today we're gonna talk about Horney and Jung. We might finish a little early, just depends on how into everything we get, basically. Karen Horney, again, like things you do and say when you're a psychologist, particularly who teaches personality. Karen Horney is my favorite psychoanalyst. Like who says that? Who does? Me, apparently. But I like Horney quite a bit. I also recognize she is very flawed, and we'll talk about all of that. But Karen Horney was alive from 1885 to 1952. She was very independent. She was one of very few women doctors at this time. Basically, women largely were not being accepted to medical schools. Horney got in because her dad was rich, and I think kind of paid them off. But if it were today, she would have gotten in on her own merits. She was very intelligent. And she was the first person to challenge Freud. Now, really interestingly, I did not know this until I was trying to find new videos for today, because the one I had got deleted off the internet. I couldn't find any really good ones, so we don't have a Horney video, but she never met Freud. And apparently Freud was like very put out that she never like deigned to come to Vienna to see him, because that's what you were supposed to do if you were a psychodynamic theorist, is come to see the master. And she just like wrote, like she didn't care. She's like, I'm gonna do my own thing, you do your own thing, Freud. And she was trained, and she was far enough down the line that like she was able to be trained by someone other than Freud. And when she was doing therapy, she concluded that her patients didn't have psychosexual problems. They had social and financial problems. So Freud argued that girls were inferior to boys due to biology. Again, that they have this inferiority because they don't have a penis, so they have penis envy. Horney argued girls feel inferior to boys due to culture. Right? Then as now, the patriarchy is a thing, right? Men tend to have more power, men tend to be more respected. Particularly then, most women who were middle class and above were not allowed, much less expected, to work outside the home. The reason I'm specifying socioeconomic status is, of course, women were the poverty line and lower have always had to work, right? We've always talked about, well, women were protected. No. If you were a poor woman, you were working, right? So just sustain your family. And so I think that's an important distinction. They still didn't have as much power as men, though. So Horney said the penis is just the phallus. It's just a symbol of social power. So it's that lack of social power that leads to feelings of inferiority. It's not penis envy, right? Instead, she said, what women envy is the freedom to pursue their interests and ambitions. Again, this echoes for us today, unfortunately, over 100 years after she was writing this, right? And Freud, as you can imagine, did not like this. She also her psychology was called the feminine psychology. And she kind of coined this term that's a little bit of like tongue in cheek, but she came up with womb envy. She said, okay, well, if we're going to say that women have penis envy, then men have women and have womb envy. That men and boys have a jealousy towards the female capacity to bear and nurse children. That is a huge power, right? You are creating life, and then you can nurture life. I know when I was pregnant, like there were times I would just like sort of stop and be like, I am like growing a human, right? Like it really is amazing that that is something that women can do. And she said that men respond indirectly to this womb envy by doing things like denying women equal rights, having rituals and taboos against things that are related to feminine hygiene or female bodily functions. You know, some cultures have like cleansing rituals when you first get your period, or things we've already talked about, like witchcraft, right? Being a way to sort of like put women in their place. So she said, thus, a woman's sense of inferiority is acquired. It's not constitutional. It's not like you're born without a penis, so you're like, oh, woe is me, right? She said, men write the history, men create the rules of society, and women respond sometime with what she called flight from womanhood. And she was writing about this in the 1920s, so about 100 years ago, where she said, you know, you will have women who wish they were men. Around this time is when it first started to become acceptable a little bit for women to wear pants, right? Dress certain ways. And then a big thing people were writing about around this time is frigidity, which is just a way of saying sometimes women don't want to have sex with men, right? And she said that's cultural. That's not like innate, right? That's sort of a woman's reaction to all this junk being put on her. And she said that women will sometimes have a fear of success because they fear they'll lose their friends if they succeed. They'll lose their social support network. And women more than men recognize the importance of that social support network, right? So certainly something that is a totally different conceptualization from Freud, right? Talking way more about the power of culture. Just like something related to this, and you'll read something from Horney for Monday for our discussion. But I was just watching a video yesterday about like different interpretations of biblical and cultural ideas. And one of them is like the translations of the Bible that have gotten carried down. So like the word that we used when they talked about Eve coming from Adam's rib, actually, like if you translate it more directly, means like his side. So it's more like they were split in half and made equals, which is really interesting. And there are some other things like that, right? People who do translations, and this is true whether it's the Bible or the Iliad, right, purposely choose how they translate it into modern language. So it's sort of interesting to think about these conceptualizations we have and how they might be influenced by some dude somewhere, right? My favorite is that for years before the printing press, every single Bible had to be like copied by hand, right? Or like any type of work. And so for Bibles in particular, it tended to be monks. And it was often like the monks in training who got this grunt work. So some of the like early versions that are still around, there's like doodles because they were like, you know, probably teenagers or boys around like college age, right? And I would be doodling if all I had to do was sit there and like recopy a book, right? And there's also a question of like, could there have been errors? And those got carried down, right? So interesting to think about. All right, so Horney, though, as much as, again, I admire her, I think she's cool. As I mentioned, she had her own issues. So she talks about her basics, the basics ways that people operate, essentially. And these are not happy, just putting it out there. So she talked about basic evil. And basic evil is what's done to children when their parents are indifferent to them. She talked about this as being parental selfishness and disrespect. And to give context to this, Horney was physically abused pretty badly by her father. So again, it's important to know, particularly when we're listening to someone theorize about childhood, what was the context? And a lot of Horney's really negative ideas came from her own personal experience. She talked about basic hostility, which is a rage in the child that's activated by that basic evil. And the rage is directed at the parents. And even if your parents are abusive, that's a problem, right? Because your parents are who's going to feed you, right? Who's going to provide for your basic needs. In theory, they should be the people who provide you love and support, right? So Horney argued you are destroying what you need the most, and this is like a no-win position. Basic anxiety is really similar to Adler's conceptualization of inferiority complex, Erikson's conceptualization of trust versus mistrust. So she said people will have mistrust, shame, guilt, a sense of inferiority, and you can't live a life caught between this anxiety and hostility. You need a compromise to like be able to survive, and that can create a split, and that can create further conflicts. And so I'm going to kind of go back and forth to this. I used to pass this out as a handout, and then I realized like I'm killing a lot of trees. I had a photo of it from back in 2020 when I had to teach this class. I'm like, why don't I just put that in the slide? So hopefully you all are able to see this, but I will walk you through it. And so again, we start with this idea of basic evil, that you have this indifference, this lack of love, maybe even punitiveness from parents. And that activates this basic hostility in the child. And you've got some conflict and anxiety because the child is helpless and they need love. So they repress and sort of change the direction of their rage to themselves. And that's where the basic anxiety comes in. That anxiety, mistrust, shame, doubt, guilt. They still feel this need for security. So this is supposed to say defensive compromise comes into place. And this is where you get into the neurotic needs. So I'm going to flip back one slide to talk about those in more detail. So neurotic needs are rigid, inflexible, absolutist, and infused with hostility. And Horney argued these are actually only neurotic when they're disproportionate to other needs in your life. And part of what she talked about here was the tyranny of the shoulds. The idea that we should do something, or you must do something. And all those shoulds and musts can get really overwhelming. So, think about the things you have to do. And how overwhelming is it if you allow yourself no flexibility? I have to get all these things done today, right? If I was fully that, I would have been like, okay, I have to get this entire proposal done Tuesday, and then I have to stay up all night to grade people's exams. I have learned I can't do that, right? I have learned that's not fair to you all because I will not grade them accurately. And so even though it kills me, I put them off, right? To a time where I can give them my focus, my strategy. Now, what's really interesting, a couple lectures down the road, when we talk about learning theory, one of the people that Horney trained was Albert Ellis, who came up with rational emotive therapy. And this idea of musts and shoulds was really big in his theory and therapy. To the point that he made little stickers that was like, I just should all over myself. You're shoulding all over me, right? This idea of like, he would even say like, don't masturbate, right? Having some fun with like psychoanalytic stuff, but also fully acknowledging this is something we do to ourselves. And so what Horney argued is you've got these neurotic needs, these tyrannizing shoulds, all the things you have to do, right? And you come up with protective strategies to, I mean, these are kind of like ego defense mechanisms, right? Ways to protect yourself, ways to cope. And so you might develop neurotic interpersonal styles as a result of that. You've got this neurotic paradox where you're protecting yourself by rejecting yourself. And we're going to talk about her different ideas of the self on another slide. It's self-perpetuating, but it's also self-defeating. And then we'll get into these different ideas of real self in a minute. So her protective strategies kind of fell into three categories. The first is self-effacing, moving toward. You might deny your own self so that you can move towards somebody else. If you love me, you will not hurt me. Mastery is moving against. If I have power, no one can hurt me. And then resignation is moving away. If I withdraw from everybody else, no one can hurt me. And again, Horney had these different ideas of the self that came into play, right? So if you were able to sort of resolve all this, you would have a real self, but instead you're going to have alienation from your true self. You've got conflict, contradictions, anxiety, self-hate, loss of control. These all sound very familiar from Freudian theory, right? And then what becomes really problematic sometimes is if you don't resolve those, right? Then you go back up to the top when you become a parent. And you perpetuate this in the next generation. So here are Horney's conceptualizations of the self. So she talks about the despised real self. These are false conceptions of your competence, worth, and lovability based on the belief in others' evaluations, particularly the parents. And again, thinking about her thinking of parents doing basic evil to children, right? So then you see yourself negatively, and you may reinforce a sense of helplessness in yourself. Nothing I can do about it. The real self is the true core of your being. It contains potential for growth, happiness, willpower, special capacities and gifts, and the urge for self-realization. So the need to be spontaneously what you truly are. So this sounds a little bit like Adler's ideas, right? This is also going to sound really familiar when we cover humanistic theory. A lot of this goes into Rogers's ideas about development. The actual self is distinguished from the subjectively perceived real self as how you are currently existing, right? We're not always being true to ourselves, our real selves. So it's how you're getting through the day physically and mentally, you know, objectively, who are you presenting to the world? And then the ideal self is the damaged real self, the self that's been hurt by negative evaluations and indifference and evil from your parents. This is the self that struggles with those tyrannies of the shoulds, and it strives to be perfect in a wishful way as compensation for feelings of inadequacy. Don't know what that last word is. Cool. But feelings of inadequacy will get us there. This is something we see like kiddos struggle with sometimes, right? As much as I've tried not to put this on her, my kiddo is perfectionistic, probably because my husband and I both are, even though we try not to put that on her. And we've been really talking about how you don't have to be perfect. And she came up with something last week that I think is just like the best philosophy for life. She said, I'm perfect at some things, but not a lot of things. And I'm like, yeah, that's great. Roll with that. And that's not what the ideal self can do. So here are those solutions to the neurotic conflict. The self-effacing solution is moving toward or compliance. You're gonna say this: if this person loves me, they won't hurt me, even though unfortunately we know that's not always true, right? So they need affection and approval. Sometimes they let their partner take way too much control. I had a client when I was on residency who was in her 40s and her husband gave her an allowance because she didn't work. It just felt really infantilizing, right? You restrict your life to very narrow borders, sometimes the borders set by your partner, right? And you're going to identify with that despised real self at the top here. The expansive solution or mastery is moving against. This is aggression. So they need power and omnipotence and perfection. They'll exploit others to get what they want. They want social recognition and prestige. They want admiration. They're trying to achieve. By power, no one can hurt me. And so they're relating to that ideal self, that damaged real self, right? They're really dominated by that tyranny of the shoulds. And then the resignation solution is freedom, is moving away, is detachment. So restriction of life to narrow borders again, but now they're not the narrow borders set by your partner, they're the ones set by yourself. Trying to be self-sufficient and perfection in a different way. If I withdraw, nothing can hurt me. And they'll sort of go between the despised real self and the ideal self. If you notice, none of these are the real self. None of these are the actual self, right? So none of these are great. All right, that happy note. We'll start talking about Carl Jung. So Carl Jung was around from 1875 to 1961. He was born in Switzerland, and he wanted to be an archaeologist. However, at the time, medical school was much cheaper than going to get like a PhD. And so that's all he could afford, so that's what he did. His first professional assignment as a psychiatrist was with Eugene Bleuler. And if you've taken adult psychopathology, that name might sound familiar. He came up with the first sort of categorization system for mental disorders. And Bleuler is the one who coined the term schizophrenia. So Bleuler was working at a mental hospital with a lot of inpatient folks, so pretty severe psychopathology. So he had that background. And then in 1907, he met Freud. And I love this description. They were mutually impressed with each other. And Freud really considered Jung, like, this guy's going to be my intellectual heir. This is going to be my successor. But not too long later, in 1913, he started dissenting from Freud. So many reasons. He thought Freud was putting way too much emphasis on sex and also aggression. Again, this is why most people broke with him. And Freud never forgave Jung's defection. Jung, very interestingly, over and above Freud, had a lot of other influences. So he was really interested in Eastern religions and Eastern mysticism. He was fascinated with ancient mythology. And then alchemy. So if you're not familiar with this term, this is the idea that like you can turn something else into gold, right? Not physically proper, possible, but again, just sort of like this mystic idea. So he eventually developed his own school of thought, which was called analytical psychology. What? Okay. Let me see for the heck of it. Let's see if they'll let me watch it on YouTube. Fingers crossed. Nope, unavailable. All right. Let me see real quick if there's any good young videos. Should check that one when I check the Horneye one. Yeah, these all look pretty not intriguing. Let me see if there's an interview of him. I mean, he was alive till the 60s, right? There should be something, you would think. There we go. Oh, I don't want 3 hours of it, though. Here we go. We've got a minute. We'll do that.
You know, man doesn't stand forever his nullification. You know, man doesn't stand forever his nullification. Once there will be a reaction. And I see it setting in, you know, when I think of my patients, they all seek their own existence and to assure their existence against that complete atomization into nothingness or into meaninglessness. Man cannot stand a meaningless life. We need more understanding of human nature because the only real danger that exists is man himself. He is the great danger, and we are pitifully unaware of it. We know nothing of man, far too little. His psyche should be studied because we are the origin of all coming evil.
Again, very uplifting, but also really interesting, right? Fully acknowledging that, you know, the evil that is done is often, almost always, right, human created. I'm going to put this link in for next time. Not as pretty, but it's a direct link, so it should work. And so, yeah, the idea that, and again, remember, Jung, like everybody else, right, lived through 2 world wars. He had seen the evil that had been done, particularly during World War II, right? And so, again, fully acknowledging that there was nothing divine or animalistic, right? That these were people who did this. Now, Jung, I want to say he went off the rails, but he came up with a theory that's like, in some ways, even more out there than Freud's, to be perfectly honest. So he, again, remember, he's very into myth. And one of the things he noticed as he read ancient mythology is there's a lot of commonalities, right? Over and over, he saw sort of the same things over and over. And he interpreted this to mean that we all share a collective unconscious. That these are memories and ideas that all humans share, most of which are going to reside in our unconscious. And that these are the sum total of all human existence. That these are shared by all humans, so everyone in this room, everyone all across the world. And that there's an inherent tendency of the disposition to have certain fundamental experiences, that there are certain social roles, certain emotions, certain language and symbolization that are transcendent of time and culture. And he argued that couldn't just be on accident. He argued this has to be something, again, collectively unconscious, we all have this, right? And it's, we would argue this is why, or he would argue this is why you see, again, like similar deities or stories in ancient Greece as you did in ancient China, even though they had no connection that we know of. This is why you see like pyramids built in the Americas by indigenous people as well as in Egypt, even though at the time that was the only way to build high, right? Just architecturally. So he came up with this idea of archetypes. And these are the core ideas of how people think about the world unconsciously, right? But also consciously. So these are universal themes, and he tried to organize these into certain archetypes. It's a universal thought form or predisposition to understand the world in certain ways. And he said these are never fully known or acknowledged in most cases. These remain unconscious. These are symbolized in myths, in dreams, in art. And these are why we see things like the hero figure, the earth mother, the devil, some sort of supreme being from culture to culture to culture. And again, here's someone who was into mysticism. So he said this was all a connection to the greater cosmic process. Some of the archetypes he talked about is the persona, and that's the role we play in society. It's a mask that we wear to adjust to society. And sometimes we have assigned roles that we portray. And again, as we talked about our very first lecture, persona is part of the word personality, right? And so sort of arguing that we might be kind of like putting on a mask in our day-to-day lives when we present ourselves. The shadow represents the unsociable, taboo, and unacceptable thoughts that he said we all have. He said the shadow is a necessary companion with the persona, and the persona is masking the shadow. He said we are incomplete without a shadow, and that things will come out. So like prejudice is our projected shadow. So things we're afraid we see in ourselves, we project onto other people who are different than us. He also came up with these ideas of the anima and the animus. The anima is the feminine archetype. And interestingly, he said all people, regardless of gender, have both the anima and the animus. So it can be the feminine part of the male psyche, and it's related to our ability to enter into relationships. The animus, maybe not surprisingly, is the masculine archetype. And it is part of the masculine part of the female psyche. It's rational, it's analytical. Like Horney, he also had a conceptualization of the self. The self, to me, in Jung's writing, is like the ego in Freud's writing. It's striving to unify the parts of the personality, to come up with compromises for them. It directs the orderly distribution of psychic energy, so all parts of the personality are represented appropriately. It is your center or your midpoint of personality. So if you've ever done like a yoga meditation and they talk about kind of finding like the core of yourself, this is similar to that. And the development of the self and like putting everything together is the life's goal in Jung's mind. He said that it doesn't fully really develop or even begin to fully develop until middle age. So this takes a while. To Jung, the key to mental health is opening up to the collective unconscious. Jung believed you were not a whole person until you opened up to everything within you. He said if you deny any part of this, then you are going to be off balance. And I do have to say, so I teach a whole class on clinical psych where we go through like theories of therapy. And the case study book I used, thank God they took this one out. They had a Jungian case study with some dream interpretation. And it was like the hardest thing to read of anything I teach. Like I felt bad for my students because it was hard for me to reread it every time. So I'm very glad they took it out. So he's a little out there, right? But he's also, again, stepping away from Freud. Horney was stepping away from Freud. Adler stepped away in a different way. And all of their theorizing is going to inspire the next generations we talk about. So we'll have 2 days of discussion. We're going to discuss some some Horney and Jung readings. And then we will, on Wednesday, talk about like modern interpretations of psychoanalysis, and then we're gonna start talking about humanism. And you're gonna see a lot of influence, particularly from like Adler and Horney in that. All right, we're gonna wrap up early today, thank goodness, because my voice is about to go. Kind of just worked out. But I will see you all Monday for in person. Also, if anyone's gonna be at FinFest tomorrow, I'll be there with my family. You can usually find us by the bounce houses.